So this is a video about the nature of truth and paradox. So for example, a paradox could be said to be lying is bad, lying is good. Right? Because if you say that lying is bad, then you define it as bad, and if you say it's good, then that's a paradox. If it is simultaneously good and bad. But is it? So we can look at maybe different circumstances and determine for ourselves. So let's say that you are in a situation with someone that you love, and you've forgotten something that you really should have, and you kind of don't want to like face up to them, and yet you would want them to face up to you, and just share what's going on, and so you can just kind of move on with your plans. In that case, probably lying is bad, because you're just lying so that you can avoid some uncomfortable feelings, and it's really like to the detriment of another person. They're kind of like in the dark about something, and maybe you might even have to lie later to cover it up again if something else comes up. So in that circumstance, and actually probably most humans throughout time will agree that in almost all circumstances, lying is not really the best plan, right? But let's flip that on its head for a second. Let's say that you are in Paris in 1942, and there's a knock at your door, and it's a Nazi, and they're asking you if your neighbor is a Jew, and you know that they are. Well, in that circumstance, the best thing that you can do is lie, because you're protecting the life of your neighbor. You're not necessarily gaining anything out of it to someone else's detriment by lying. You're actually protecting your neighbor, and you're even protecting this misguided soul at your door who might years later be horrified at what they've done. And so the best thing that you can do in that circumstance is to lie. So rather than saying lying has to be good or lying has to be bad, you can just say, well, lying's goodness or badness really depends upon the context and the circumstance. And there is a kind of a paradox in that situation, that lying in and of itself has both the potential to be good or the potential to be bad or useful or nefarious. And so this kind of a perspective and understanding that there is a sort of a paradox to truth can help us sort of understand the situations in our lives and not have to cling to certain ideologies or perspectives to sort of save us. You know, it's very tempting to want to like put something in a box and say, oh, this is the nature of this thing, and that's just the way that it is. And if I just carry around this understanding with me and apply it to every circumstance, then I'll always be okay as long as I just do this thing and not this other thing, this good thing and not this other bad thing. But really, life is more complicated than that. And in a way, this creation is inviting us in every moment to be present to whether or not something, even though it might be under 99% of circumstances the right thing to do, is in fact the best thing. And I'll offer another piece around paradox. And I wrote it into a storytelling, kind of spoken word piece that sometimes I share before fire dancing. And it really explains to some degree the problem of evil that a lot of people have. If there is, all this goodness and that creation has all this beauty and this truth, and if life is good, then why is there evil? Or if you believe in God and God is all good, then how could God allow for there to be evil? And this kind of addresses that in a certain way by offering that perhaps the ultimate creation is wise beyond our understanding, and that the reasons why things that we would rather not have happen is because it affords the possibility for other things. And it goes like this. I would share with you how light is born of darkness. I think it's strange that it's only because of ignorance that wonder and discovery exist. If we knew everything, if we knew the future, we just walk through life saying, yeah, there's that, I've seen that, and I knew that was going to happen. But because at first we're blind, Then when things are revealed, we can say, wow, did you see that? And after all, it's only because of pain and suffering that courage exists. If we were invincible, if we were immortal, we would just sail in and save a loved one in peril without effort. But because we do fear our own suffering, our own humiliation, then when we feel that fear and act anyway, courage is born. And perhaps strangest and most bizarre, it is only because of wickedness that nobility exists. See, if we were born to be good, if we just had to be good, we'd just walk through life doing as we should. But because we can be tempted to take a little extra at someone else's expense, then when we choose only to accept what is freely offered, or we can earn through our effort, that choice makes us noble. Now, I share all this certainly not to justify any wickedness of any kind, but rather to suggest that when we see those things in life we cannot change, we embrace them as part of a greater whole and know that it is they that give us the choice to see what part we play when all things are possible. So that's a piece that I wrote, and it kind of reflects an understanding that in order to have the most beautiful feelings that we have, there has to be the other side of life. The most, sort of prolific translator of Eastern philosophy into Western language might be considered Alan Watts. He's an amazing human, and he was an amazing human, rest his soul, and he has this really interesting perspective on the whole piece of truth and paradox, and how it is really impossible to have an up without a down. You can't imagine the room that you're in and say, what if everything was up? Up is a concept that only exists in relation to down, just like goodness or beauty or truth is really only in relation to its opposite. There's another little story that I'll share. It's a parable about a horse farmer, and it's told in the Taoist tradition. In the Tao Te Ching, if you have not read this book, it's the most translated book outside of the Bible. It's an incredible philosophical text, if you want to call it that. Some people call it a religious text, but it's 81 poems. And in it, the author, Lao Tzu, he, in the very, very beginning, says, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And then he goes on to write 81 poems about the Tao. Now, that obviously suggests to you that, well, it's worth trying. Even if it's impossible to totally capture the nature of truth using language, we should at least give it a shot. So I'm going to tell the story, and then I'll come back to Taoism and the nature of truth. Long ago, there was a horse farmer, and he was well known in his village and well respected. And one day, his prize horse ran away, broke out of the corral, and just rode off into the distance. And everyone came around, all his neighbors, and wanted to commiserate with him. They said, "Oh, this is such a terrible thing. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. That horse was so magnificent. You must be very sad." And much to their surprise, the horse farmer said, "You think that's bad, do you?" And he walked off. And everybody looked puzzled at one another and said, that's very strange. Doesn't he know when something bad's happened to him? Anyway. Now, on down the road, a couple of weeks later, without warning, his prize horse runs out of the nearby forest and just brings 12 new horses right into his corral. Just leads them right into the open gate. His son shuts the gate, and he's got 12 new horses. His neighbors all come around, and they're so happy for him. They're amazed. How could this even happen? They're telling him that he should be so, so glad. And again, he looks at them and says, "You think that's good, do you?" and walks off. His neighbors, again, have no idea where his head is at. A week after, his son, in the process of breaking one of the horses so that it can be ridden, is thrown, and his leg is broken. Again, all of his neighbors come around and try and console him, only to find that he is not bothered at all. A week after that, the army comes by, conscripting soldiers out of the village, and because his son is injured, he cannot be drafted off to war to die. Now, we might be able to recognize out of our own lives a lot of circumstances that are like this, right? Something happens, maybe we think it's bad, it looks on the face of it to be obviously bad, but then later, only because that situation happened, something else magnificent occurs. And so the whole idea of bad and good is perhaps a kind of fiction of our mind relative to time and space, because again, in the context of that given situation, yes, it's bad that his son broke his leg, but in the whole situation of life, it's just another turning of the wheel. Now, Taoists look at reality like that the very, very best things in life are inextricably interwoven with the very worst things. And just as there is no up without a down, there is no good without a bad. And so the best thing to do in life is really to go beyond ideas of good and bad and just recognize that everything is just an aspect of this polarity, this, creation. And it is interesting that when you think about the Bible and the whole story of Adam and Eve, there's another, wisdom tradition that has this whole, story around good and evil and the knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Adam and Eve ate of that, and suddenly they saw that they were naked, whereas before they were just in their natural state, and they didn't look at that as being bad or shameful. Right? And it is when they begin to have the knowledge, or think they have the knowledge perhaps, of what good and evil is, that's the moment when they are hurled from paradise. Perhaps paradise is a place within that we can achieve when we just let go of our ideas of good and bad and just embrace everything as a whole. Now, it's very natural, of course, to be pleased by certain circumstances and displeased by others, but the quicker you can kind of release, particularly the displeasure, the more available you are for the things in your life and the way that the wheel might be turning in your favor. And so I shared that I would get back to, Taoism and that whole piece. And so I have shared a little bit about, how there is this understanding of the, intertwining of good and bad, and that the nature of reality is something kind of beyond our concept of that. And so I hope that some of the things that I've shared are fruitful for you. I'll share one more thing, which is kind of more specifically how this can be useful to us in our lives, because a lot of this seems like just a lot of paradox and philosophy and kind of abstract thinking. But as I mentioned just a moment ago, there is a moment in your life where you're looking at something as bad, and we have it, throughout our lives, many circumstances where we're looking at something as being bad, and we are experiencing a set of emotions that are associated with that perception that things are bad. And the more that we sort of hold on to that experience, I'm attached to the fact that this other thing didn't happen, and this is the thing that happened. The more that we do that, the less free we are to maybe embrace the new and more magnificent thing that's coming along right as we're maybe lamenting what has just happened. And so if we can carry this perspective with us through our lives And remember, whenever you're experiencing something that is undesirable, this might be just about to turn into something that is very, very desirable. Another piece to this whole puzzle is around our experience of life and how happiness is not necessarily depending on something external to us, but rather our perception of it. For example, you can have two people in exactly the same circumstance. One of them is absolutely miserable, while the other is perfectly happy. So you could say then that that kind of demonstrates how happiness is not a consequence of external circumstances, but rather how those individual people are perceiving that. Another element of that is expectations. Let's say you got $150,000. If you were expecting $300,000, you're going to be kind of upset and you're going to be kind of, mad about the situation. But if you were only expecting $75,000, suddenly you're elated. So understanding that we have the power to adjust the perspectives and perceptions that we have around things. And for example, in that circumstance where we get 150 and we were expecting 300 and we might be really upset, we can be aware in that moment using these kinds of perspectives and say, here I am. Getting 150,000 is good, getting 150,000 is bad. Either one could be true for me, depending upon my perception. And so, in that moment, whatever it is, whatever scale you're working with, whatever you receive, if you can remember to return to gratitude and appreciate whatever it is that you have, you can learn to be happy regardless of the circumstance that you're in. Now, there's another, piece to this. Gratitude is good. Gratitude is bad. You'll rarely hear anybody say that, but let's think on it. Let's say that you're in a job that you hate, that you really don't enjoy your job. You took it because it was the job available at the time, you needed to pay your rent, or whatever your story is. But you're telling yourself, at this job, I should just be grateful. I should just be grateful that I have this job. You might end up in a job that you hate for 10 years, 20 years, the rest of your life. So understanding gratitude is good and is really important. And just focusing on gratitude and maybe not also the natural intention that might be growing within you through the inspiration to another job and putting energy slowly and steadily. Well, you might keep your job and use your gratitude to kind of smooth over the feelings you might be having as you're working through this job and paying your rent. Allowing that energy of your displeasure. Displeasure is bad. Displeasure is good. The energy from your displeasure can motivate you to spend a certain amount of your time focusing on what inspires you, what other job might come next, what your friends are doing. Are they working at a company that they really love? So I hope that this sort of exposition of how truth has a certain quality to it that is essentially paradox. And I hope that, everything has been, and will be fruitful for you when you apply these concepts. Much love. Take care.